Notable slang words for naughty bits in alternate timelines that aren't used here. Across alternate timelines, humanity got real creative when it came to naming their bits and bobs. Some terms are elegant, some are bizarre, and some are just downright hilarious. In this video, we're taking a lighthearted stroll through alternate Earths, exploring the weirdest, wackiest, and most wonderful slang for naughty bits that never made it to our timeline, but probably should have. Male genital, thunder twig, common in a 1970s UK variant timeline, from a bawdy seaside song, Shake Your Thunder Twig for Luck. Alternate history. In this 1970s UK variant timeline, coastal towns developed a bawdy culture where vulgar songs were normalized and even aired on public radio. The term thunder twig originated in a widely known pub jingle sung after darts tournaments, believed to bring good luck if shouted while flashing. These seaside towns became famous for their absurd festivals, like the annual Twig Shake Parade. Humor overrode modesty, and this phrase became a staple of working-class flirtation. Even MPs jokingly used it during debates in Parliament. Willy Bolt. Alternate 1980s Australian miners slang, meant to imply hardware you can't lose, still used playfully. Alternate history. In a rough-and-tumble alternate 1980s Australia, particularly in miner communities, sexual slang merged with industrial metaphors. Tools and anatomy became interchangeable in speech, and Willy Bolt emerged as a term of endearment and mock bravado. Men joked about tightening the willy bolt before going on dates, and souvenir bolt-shaped keychains were sold in outback towns. The phrase caught on nationally after a beer commercial parodied it with a winking kangaroo mechanic. By the 2000s, it was seen as a retro term of affection. Meat quill. Renaissance revival slang in a steampunk London variant, where penmanship metaphors became double entendres. Alternate history. In a steampunk London timeline where writing was revered as both art and innuendo, metaphors about quills and ink took on double meanings. The rise of erotic literature salons gave birth to slang like meat quill, a playful term for phallic creativity. Aristocrats spoke in layered puns, and even Shakespearean plays were retrofitted to include such allusions. Steam-powered typewriters with suggestive designs were mass-produced, further embedding the metaphor. The slang became common in both literary and intimate circles. Giggle post. Popular in a 1990s US alt timeline where bawdy teen comedies mainstreamed surreal humor. Alternate history. In a 1994 breakout teen comedy called Locker Room Apocalypse, a lovable slacker named Ricky Dean coined the term giggle post as his favorite absurd euphemism for male anatomy. Delivered with deadpan seriousness, "Coach, my giggle post got caught in the locker latch." The line became an instant hit. The film's popularity on home video and cable, where censors let the euphemism slide, led to a cultural snowball. T-shirts, boxer shorts, Mad Magazine spoofs. By 1996, teachers were complaining about giggle post spreading like wildfire in middle schools. MTV's Total Request Live eventually gave up trying to censor it. They knew banning it would only fuel the legend. Tommyknocker. From an alt-timeline mining town myth where mischievous spirits tap on tunnels, appropriated for anatomical reference. Alternate history. In this branch, mining town folklore was not only believed, it was documented. Spirits called Tommyknockers were seen as mischievous protectors or seducers, tapping on tunnel walls to warn or lure. The term was co-opted by young miners to describe their anatomy in a joking way, as in, "My Tommyknocker's restless tonight." It spread during the Great Tunnel Rush of 1897, when tales of spectral romance dominated pulp tabloids. Supernatural-seeming pregnancies were blamed on the knockers. Crown stick. From a Victorian military barracks in another timeline, crown equals glands, stick equals obvious. Alternate history. In an alternate Victorian timeline where soldiers coined most of the nation's slang, crown stick became popular in barracks during the colonial era. Soldiers referred to their genitals as their personal weapon for queen and country, with the term crown referencing both the monarchy and the glands. It was eventually encoded into wartime song lyrics and used in recruiting posters with subtle double meanings. This gave the term national recognition, though it was mostly used in rowdy taverns.
Female genital. Peachlock, 18th century Old Caribbean slang from a smuggler's diary. Imagery of locking away treasure. Alternate history. In this Old Caribbean timeline from the 18th century, female pirates and smugglers developed coded language for sexuality and desire. Peachlock emerged from a secret diary kept by a notorious captain's lover, referring to both chastity and hidden treasure. It became a popular symbol painted on the sides of smuggling crates to confuse customs agents. Female-run taverns often bore the name in secret signage. Over time, the term took on both romantic and comedic undertones. Honey turn. Jazz-era slang in a timeline where dancehall metaphors dominated flirt talk. Alternate history. In a jazz-drenched timeline where the 1930s never ended, flirtation was all rhythm and metaphor. Honey turn described a suggestive twirl during slow dancing, a move that doubled as a subtle invitation. Dance halls became coded spaces for courtship, and women who could turn sweet were considered irresistible. The phrase was memorialized in jazz lyrics, with lines like, "She gave me the old honey turn and left me dizzy." It's still used today in this timeline's version of Tinder bios. Purse swing. From an alt-Edwardian England where sewing metaphors were heavily sexualized. Alternate history. In an alt-Edwardian England where etiquette and flirtation were buried under layers of embroidery, purse swing became a whispered euphemism among society women. Derived from the constant needlework women performed while gossiping, it represented something delicate, enclosed, and handcrafted. Diaries from debutantes mention stitching the purse before trysts. The term eventually leaked into fashion catalogs with scandalous double meanings. It remains a symbol of reserved sensuality. Blossom hatch. Hippie-era Pacific Northwest slang from an early 1970s historical divergence. Still used in poetry there. Alternate history. A Pacific Northwest hippie commune timeline embraced natural cycles in every facet of life, and blossom hatch became the accepted term for first-time intimacy and menstruation alike. Spiritual guides would bless the hatch with floral wreaths, and entire ceremonies were created to honor bodily awakenings. Art festivals featured giant paper blossoms with hatches at their centers, where poetry was read aloud. Sex education was psychedelic and celebratory. This term still exists in activist zines from that timeline. Moon pocket. Common in a post-beat timeline where lunar metaphors stood in for all female cycles. Alternate history. In a post-beat generation timeline, lunar phases replaced the Gregorian calendar and shaped everything from social events to intimacy rituals. The moon pocket referred not just to anatomy, but to a sacred space of power, privacy, and inner tides. Writers like Allen Ginsberg's counterpart in that world popularized it in gender-fluid poetry circles. Women wore crescent pendants that opened to reveal quotes about their pocket. It was sensual, cosmic, and deeply personal. Velvet hinge. Playful 1920s burlesque slang in a Prohibition timeline. The hinge is the entryway. Alternate history. This Prohibition-era timeline featured a rise in luxurious underground cabarets, where euphemism was king. Velvet hinge referred to the theatrical reveal, the moment a performer's costume opened with intent. It quickly became coded slang among burlesque performers for female anatomy, especially when combined with acts involving elaborate curtains. "Mind the hinge," they'd say, smirking backstage. To this day, red velvet swatches are pinned inside private clubs as lucky charms.
Unisex or multi-use. Joy handle, used for either set of parts in a bawdy 1950s radio comedy timeline. Alternate history. In a 1950s timeline where racy radio comedies slipped risque wordplay past strict censors, joy handle became an instant hit. It referred both to a literal door latch and, with a wink, one's most treasured control mechanism. Hosts like Slick Benny on the Hour used it constantly. "Give that joy handle a jiggle, sweetheart," and audiences howled. Though the FCC in that world eventually cracked down, its legacy persisted in comedy, pin-up art, and embroidered bathrobes. Today, it's a staple of vintage innuendo. Bits of bliss. Common in alt-UK Cornish fishing towns where frank talk was the norm. Alternate history. In a peaceful UK Cornwall-based fishing town timeline, bits of bliss referred to anything small, treasured, and joy-inducing. Sweets, seashells, and eventually, body parts. It was used without shame, even by elderly villagers who'd shout it during card games or innuendo-laced storytelling nights at the pub. The phrase crossed into regional songs and children's rhymes, then became a cheeky wedding vow staple. "I pledge to cherish your bits of bliss, in fog or fair." Entire community murals were painted in its honor. Sex education there was matter-of-fact and oddly poetic. Garden gate. Can mean either gender in timelines where gardening equals courting. Alternate history. In a slower-paced, pastoral world that rejected industrialization, love and courtship revolved around metaphors of growth and tending. Garden gate was used as a respectful euphemism for the entrance to one's heart, body, or both, symbolic of consent and readiness. Suitors would often hand-carve wooden gates as gifts, and opening the gate was a formal declaration of desire. Entire dating manuals used this language, filled with floral diagrams and vine metaphors. It remains a sacred phrase in wedding ceremonies and fertility festivals. Kiss lever. Found in early cyberpunk timeline slang, the lever being anything you pull for pleasure. Alternate history. In a neon-soaked cyberpunk timeline that branched off of ours in 1987, when PC technological advances exploded beyond our own and hacker subculture became mainstream by 1996, the fusion of arcade culture and sensuality birthed strange slang. In this strand, the tech surge of 1987 wasn't contained by corporate consolidation. Underground cybernetic engineers and glam hacker collectives leaked blueprints for neurohaptic enhancers, leading to rapid democratization of mood programming devices, interactive pleasureware, and social arcades. Kiss machines were common in nightclubs and arcades by 1998, machines that let you choose a vibe track, send digital kisses via gloves, or even receive emotional simulations. These machines became sacred to cyberqueer and hacker romance scenes. Kiss lever became a popular euphemism referring to the switch you flip to initiate desire or intimacy, often tied to mood programming. The slang bled into everyday conversation. "He pulled my kiss lever." "Don't go flipping kiss levers unless you mean it."
It became both a meme and a marketing slogan for romance AIs.
Cat-inspired vagina slang in other timelines. Velvet paw. Popular in a 1950s UK cabaret timeline, meant to evoke softness and stealth. Used both sexually and as a term of endearment. Alternate history. In a posh 1950s UK timeline, where feline themes dominated burlesque and cabaret shows, velvet paw became the go-to euphemism for feminine allure. Gentle, stealthy, and utterly effective. Stage stars wore plush paw gloves while doing sultry glove peels, often ending their act with the whispered phrase, "Softly now, the paw strikes." The term made its way into perfumes, lingerie ads, and even political insults. Calling someone a velvet paw in Parliament meant they wielded quiet but deadly influence. It remains part of upper-class flirtation in that strand. Tabby door. Alternate 1970s Southern U.S. hippie commune slang, often used jokingly in open door or closed door metaphors about sexual availability. Alternate history. In an alternate 1970s Southern U.S. hippie commune timeline, where the hippie movement became just as popular in the South as it had in California and lasted until the mid-1980s, sexual metaphors were all feline, floral, or food-based. Tabby door was a playful, welcoming phrase used during consent-based cuddle circles and open relationship contracts. Women described themselves as tabby door closed, tabby door cracked, or tabby door open with a flower mat. The phrase became so normalized that it was included in communal birth charts and love zines. Local music festivals featured a popular stage called the Tabby Door Lounge. Cultural ripples. Music festivals in Alabama, Georgia, and North Carolina hosted a Tabby Door Lounge stage, known for sensual folk duets, drumming circles, and dance rituals. A 1983 local hit single by Sun Sister Moss titled "Flower Mat at My Tabby Door" was banned from AM radio, but adored in commune circuits. Musebox. 1980s punk scene term in an alt UK. Started as graffiti in ladies' bathrooms and ended up in underground zines. Alternate history. This one came out of an alternate 1980s punk feminist underground in the UK, where zine culture and bathroom graffiti ruled. Musebox started as defiant scrawlings in all-caps Sharpie, accompanied by hand-drawn cats giving the finger. It represented female sexuality with attitude, part punk, part poetry. Bands like the Rabid Siamese wrote lyrics like, "Open the muse box, let the riot purr." The phrase was embraced by third-wave feminists in that world and printed on patches, denim jackets, and mixtape covers. Whisker nest. 1920s burlesque slang in a timeline where feline imagery was woven into costume design and stage names. Alternate history. In a 1920s burlesque-heavy timeline where feline aesthetics were central to performance identity, whisker nest was a signature term for a performer's power spot. Dancers would pose in plush velvet lounges styled to resemble oversized cat beds, stroking fake whiskers while teasing the audience. The term also became part of matchmaking slang. "He sleeps in her whisker nest now," was whispered in backstage gossip. Even advertisements for corsets and perfumes embraced the term. It was a space of softness, mystery, and sensual sovereignty. Purr chamber. 2000 sex-positive feminist blog slang in a timeline where cat metaphors were embraced without apology. Alternate history. In an ultra-sex-positive 2000s feminist blog alt timeline, where cat metaphors were reclaimed en masse, purr chamber became the dominant term for the vagina. Not clinical, not crude, but cozy and reverent. Sex-positive zines titled Inside the Purr Chamber detailed everything from anatomy to empowerment. Workshops were hosted by Mistresses of the Purr, and sticker packs included phrases like, "Purr chamber activated." It was healing, funny, and liberating. Even medical professionals adopted the term in comfort-focused clinics. Calico pocket. Small-town Midwestern euphemism in a timeline where calico symbolized homely beauty and comfort. Alternate history. In a sweet, small-town 1950s Midwest variant timeline, where quilting, baking, and folk traditions remained dominant, calico pocket became a euphemism passed among housewives. The term suggested comfort, surprise, and softness, a place you keep something precious. It appeared in cookbooks, advice columns, and even Sunday sermons disguised as sewing metaphors. Young girls were taught to respect their pocket and never let just anyone borrow thread. It still appears embroidered in heirloom quilts. Neko hatch. Anime fandom slang in a 2010s US-Japan crossover timeline, used heavily in online roleplay communities. Alternate history. In an alternate timeline where a deeply influential anime localization studio in San Francisco, Glass Moon Media, partners with 2 Japanese doujinshi circles and begins subtly altering subtitle localization of romantic and erotic anime properties released between 2006 and 2012. Rather than suppress or sanitize sexual metaphors, they chose to amplify playful, feline, or emotionally tender language. This drew unexpected attention from both Tumblr RP communities and early deviant art writers, especially among catgirl/catboy roleplayers and LGBTQ+ youth. First appeared in an RP post titled Cherry Milk and Battle Claws, March 2010, in the Echo timeline. Used to describe the entrance to a Neko's sacred joy chamber. The post went semi-viral on a MySpace RP group, and again on a forum called Yume Pulse. The phrase, "I brushed my fingertips across her Neko hatch, careful not to startle the guardian bell," was highlighted as the moment the term broke containment. Neko hatch was the playful term for a catgirl's intimate gateway. Used in heavily modded VR chat worlds, NSFW RP servers, and satirical visual novels, the term blended kawaii aesthetics with light kink and absurdity. Deviant art bios and fanfic tags featured lines like, "No touching my Neko hatch unless we've leveled up our bond." It was a mix of parody, pride, and pixelated passion. Claw clutch. Playfully aggressive slang in a biker subculture timeline, meant to sound both dangerous and alluring. Alternate history. In a gritty biker femme subculture alt timeline, Claw Clutch emerged from women-led gangs who embraced aggressive sensuality and cat-based symbolism. The term referred to both the tight grip of dominance and the symbolic reclaiming of space and power. Jackets embroidered with claw marks and roses became iconic. Enter the Claw Clutch was code for initiation into trusted circles, emotional, erotic, or both. In modern parlance it's a compliment and a threat rolled into one.
Whether it's a giggle post, tabby door, or muse box, one thing's clear. Language always finds a way to make the taboo feel a little more playful. If you enjoyed this peek into parallel perversion, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, keep it cheeky, keep it weird, and remember, somewhere out there, they're still arguing over who coined Neko Hatch.